Hi there, and welcome back to Red State Revolt. I've actually been sitting on this content for a couple days now, and it may appear on the surface that I'm sort of late to the game in talking about this, but that's because I wanted my thoughts on the subject of abandoning Fox News to marinate for a few days and to really think about that concept and what it would look like. I have to go back and talk about the history for me with Fox News, and I really didn't watch that much of the channel going back 4 to 10 years and maybe even longer. I watched a lot of it late 90s, early 2000s, some Bill O'Reilly here and there, and then just kind of abandoned it at that point. Didn't really watch a lot. I came back to it though when O'Reilly left and they brought on Hannity and then they brought Laura in and I started watching again. But the one person that I really didn't like at that time was Tucker Carlson. I couldn't stand him. And I sort of know the history, where he came from, CNN and some other channels. But I just really couldn't stand him. I thought his arguments and debates with some of the guests on the show were annoying. He sometimes cut them off and didn't really listen to what they had to say. So I just went on to Hannity and watched something else. Then he grew on me over time, and this year, as reflected in the ratings, this year he's done really well. And I think what I've come to appreciate from him is him getting to the actual meat of the details, the nitty gritty, what's actually going on. And he hasn't made friends along the way, which I think is good. He's not a person that's ever going to have Lindsey Graham on his show, for example. And some people are scared to talk to him because I think he hits home and he tells the truth, and that's hard for people to deal with. So he's really grown on me, and I think one of the things that came out of the whole abandoned Fox News sort of movement was what happened on election night, and a lot of other news channels, say left-wing news channels, which is pretty much everybody, but those channels in particular talked about, Trump didn't win, and so his supporters, the people on Fox News, are just gonna abandon him because he didn't win, and that's not really the case. I think what left a bad taste in everybody's mouth after or during the election results were the early calls. And I think Tucker Carlson called them out on it and said, look, you've got 2% in from Virginia. You shouldn't call it already. Even if it's statistically improbable based on exit polls or other results, the polls are sometimes wrong. It just doesn't have a good look when you call it that early, especially in light of the fact that Florida and Texas weren't called until almost 80% or even more of the vote was in, when it was very clear that Trump was going to win. It just doesn't sit well. I would rather have the media not call results until all of the results are in. Let's just stop doing that altogether. Let's just, once you got 100% of the vote in, or greater than 99%, then let's call it. Let's stop doing this. It is creating a level of distrust, and as Tucker said, we don't have faith in the system, and that's where it put us. It's possible maybe all of the misconceptions and misinformation, everything that's going on about the election now and its integrity would have changed if these calls weren't made so early. So where are people going? I guess that's the next question. And I've never really watched Newsmax. Of course, I've heard of it, but they did have a ratings win recently. This is a Forbes article where Greg Kelly's show outperformed Martha Callum's show by 26,000 viewers just in that particular time slot and that demographic, the 25 to 54 demographic. I happen to like Martha McCallum. I did watch a couple of Greg Kelly's episodes, and I thought those were good. I still don't know that I'm ready to completely abandon Tucker. I still watch him when I can. I'll be honest though, I'm not really watching a lot of Hannity. I've sort of left him, and that goes back to when he was on or before O'Reilly. I used to watch him, and he's good, but recently I've noticed that he tends to, and he admits this, talk too much as a talk show host, which he readily admits, of course, and less of a journalist, and less investigation, and less hard pressing on folks that I think need to be pressed. Like I mentioned, Lindsey Graham, that needs to happen a bit more. It's just talk and no action, and that's where I think people are getting frustrated. I don't know that I'm ready to say that Fox is fake news. I thought this was a great picture, and I don't know that there's some right-wing civil war going on with the media, but that's where people are sort of heading. They're breaking off, and I've been following a couple different news channels, mostly because I work in healthcare. I work in information technology and in the computer science space, and the combination of those has put me into a position where I've had to dive through the fake news, the misinformation around COVID. And most recently, I'm going to do a separate video on this about ivermectin. And remember, we had to go through hydrochloroquine early on in the outbreak. It's just gotten out of control. There's definitely partisans here, and it's tough to decipher what is true and what is false. And so that's led me to some alternative media sources. And so I'm curious to know what you guys are watching. I mentioned Newsmax, so maybe that's one. I've, of course, watched a ton of content from One American News, OANN. I've been a subscriber to the Epoch Times for a while. Their sister channel, the YouTube channel, is NTD, and I have subscribed to that and watched some of that content. They're younger folks, they're newer folks, they're not as polished as, of course, Fox News is, but it still provides pretty good information. The last one I'll leave you with is Sky News, and which is odd that an Australian channel would be the one to provide really good content. But here's the interesting thing about Sky News: because they are so close to China and so close to what's going on between China and in the Pacific there in Oceania, that has really provided insight into what possibly could happen in the United States and what's happening elsewhere. Plus, they're kind of no holds barred. They're hardcore people. They're funny to watch. They are on the leading edge when it comes to a lot of the breaking news, given that they're ahead of us in time, at least for most of us in the United States, right? They're a day ahead or a half a day ahead. So they tend to break news a little bit quicker than everybody else, which is sort of fascinating to see. So why have you moved? If you've moved away from Fox News, I'm curious to know what you have moved to. Go ahead and put those in the comments. That's what YouTube is all about, right? Sharing your comments and feedback. Don't forget to subscribe. I've also included links to the images of the articles that I've provided in this video content here, so you can go and read them for yourself.